მე დიდ დროს არ წაგართმევთ, უბრალოდ გეტყვით, რომ დღევანდელი თემის საწვავის არის სეკულარიზმი, რელიგიის როლი სეკულარულ საზოგადოებაში. დისკუსიის მოდერატორი არის პროფესორი Giga Zedania, Ilia სახელმწიფო უნივერსიტეტის მოდერნული კვლევის ცენტრის ხელმძღვანელი. ალბათ დამეთანხმებით, რომ ეს თემა ძალიან ახლოს არის ჩვენი საზოგადოებისთვის, იმის თვალსაზრისით, რომ საქართველო არის სეკულარული სახელმწიფო, თუმცა ძალიან ძლიერი არის ასევე რელიგიის როლი და მე ვფიქრობ, რომ ძალიან საინტერესო იქნება ჩვენი სტუმრების აზრის მოსმენა ამასთან დაკავშირებით. დიდი მადლობა მომბრძანებისთვის.
Thank you very much, Maya. So I'm very glad to welcome you all to today's discussion panel on secularism. So we will actually think about today on the place of religion in modern, democratic or modernizing and democratizing societies. And as you perhaps know, 30 years ago, actually there was a widespread consensus on the issue. Basically it was thought that religion was the thing of the past, which as a consequence of modernization would either disappear or decline or at least get privatized. And this understanding or pre-understanding was called secularization theory. And right now, during the last decade, it has been very harshly and widely criticized. But in its place, nothing has been offered so far, which would take such a dominant place. So what's happening is that throughout the world, worldwide, we are discussing the issue of interrelation between religion and democracy, or the place of religion in democratic society. And it's a burning issue both globally and locally in this country. And I'm very glad that this huge variety of positions will be covered by a very diverse panel today. We'll start with Western Europe, then move to Turkey, and then we'll come back to Georgia. And I'm sure that our distinguished panelists will provide a very interesting motivation for discussion. So we'll start like this. We'll listen to all the presentations, and after that we'll open the floor for discussions and questions. Now, who is the former bishop of the Church of England, Oxford, and also author of numerous books. And so I'm sure that both his academic experience and his personal experience as a bishop will enrich our understanding significantly of how religious institutions function in West European democracies.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very glad to be here. Now, I take it that the phrase secular society refers to a particular set of political institutions and arrangements. All states have to be concerned about the religions within their borders, and a secular society is one which has a very particular kind of relationship between the state and religious institutions. But the first question which arises, what is to be our model of the secular society? Is it to be France? Is it to be America? Or are both those inadequate? They are very, very different. France, based upon the philosophy of Voltaire, wanted freedom from religion. America, quite the contrary, based upon the philosophy of John Locke, wanted freedom for religion. Both are secular societies, both are based on very different philosophies, and both have a very different evaluation of the role of religion in their society. I'm not attracted by either of those. I would look, I think, to India, in particular as the Indian constitution has been understood by Amartya Sen, the great Nobel Prize winner. He says that the defining characteristic of a secular society is one where all religions are treated equally. The relationship can be a close relationship between the state and the religions, or it can be a hands-off, a very distant one. But the point about a secular society is it treats all religions equally. Now we have a very good example of that element of a secular society in Britain at the moment. with the funding of what are called faith schools. Faith schools are public schools, they're open to everybody free, but they have a religious foundation. And whereas in England in the past, it was only the Church of England and later on the Roman Catholic Church that had the freedom to fund and to found these schools. Now Jews, Muslims, and any other body that meets required educational standards can have money on an equal basis from the state in order to get that school going. So that is a good example of a martyr sense idea. All religions are treated equally, but in that instance, there's a very close relationship between the state and religions, because it's willing to fund their schools. Now, in England, we have a strange situation, and the reason I'm going to talk about it a little bit is because I think that there are some interesting parallels with the position of Georgia at the moment. We have an established church. The Church of England is the church by law established. 26 bishops of the Church of England sit in the second chamber, the House of Lords. The Queen is crowned in a ceremony in Westminster Abbey. Her title is the supreme head on earth of the Church of England. Now, the interesting question, is that in any sense justifiable in a modern world, in a democratic society? Can any case be made for it at all? I would suggest that no society is neutral, that every society reflects its history, its culture and religion, and that there is no logical reason why one particular religion, it might be Islam or might be any other, should not have a preeminent role within that society, provided, and this is a very crucial proviso, provided the human rights, the religious rights of all other religions are respected fully. So what I would suggest is the Church of England at the moment has a symbolic preeminence. It has no power, it has no funding from the state, but it has a symbolic preeminence. And what is interesting at the moment in England is that the most powerful defenders of the Church of England are the Jewish community and the Muslim community, because they feel the Church of England acts as a kind of umbrella under which the other religions can shelter and make their contribution to public policy. But that's, I think, it is one interesting model for Georgia to consider. And the reason why I'm interested in is, above all, I think, because of Islamic countries. I can't see Islamic countries developing, like Saudi Arabia, developing into a country like America. It's inconceivable. But could Islamic countries develop into a country like England, where Islam has a symbolic preeminence, but all the human rights of other religions are fully respected? That's why I am interested in it. Now, within this kind of society, all religions make their voices heard in the marketplace. A few years ago, there was a very, very aggressive secularism around, which wanted to chase the religious voices out of the marketplace. Now it's generally reckoned, of course, the marketplace will be crowded and the religious voices need to be heard there. But another interesting question is, what kind of voice should the religions use? A very influential American philosopher, John Rawls, argues that religions must, like everybody else, use what he calls public reasoning, with a view to achieving what he calls an overlapping consensus. In other words, religions have, so far as possible, to translate their language into ordinary, rational language. Now, from a Christian point of view, I have no real problem with that. Though, of course, there may be occasions when the crisis in the nation is such, religious bodies might want to make a particular appeal to their fundamental religious beliefs. But it seems to me a lot of that depends upon whichever culture you're in. In America, as we know, politicians can't get elected without some reference to Almighty God. But in England, people don't like it. People really distrust politicians who bring their religion into public life, you know, as though they're claiming the high moral ground. So I'm basically happy with the idea that religions should translate their fundamental moral principles into the kind of language to which everybody can resonate. Just going to refer to one other final issue, which is very much alive in England at the moment. There is a real tension between the Human Rights Act, and particularly the equality legislation in England, and certain religious believers. There are 4 cases before the Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg at the moment. 2 of those concern people who are wearing crosses. They were sacked from their jobs, one working for British Airways and others working as a nurse, because they were wearing a cross. They lost every legal case in England, so they have appealed to the European Court of Human Rights. One other case concerns a counsellor of marriage counsellor, a relationship counsellor, who refused to counsel gay couples. And he was sacked again. And he said for him it was an issue of principle. He's taken it to Strasbourg. And the other one was a registrar who refused to register publicly civil partnerships between people of the same sex. And again, he lost his job, and that has gone to Strasbourg. And there is an interesting phenomenon at the moment in that a significant number of evangelical Christians, most of these are evangelical Christians, feel that Christians are in fact being discriminated against in our society because of the very, very mechanical way in which the equalities legislation is being enacted. The equalities legislation, of course, says that nobody was discriminated against on the grounds of their religion, their sexuality, etc., etc. The key one for them is the question of their sexual orientation. There are a number of very key issues in Europe at the moment, and that is one. Thank you very much.
Concise and clear presentation of the issues. And now I will move to another panelist, Afsin Yurdakul, who is a journalist based in Istanbul, writing for such magazines as Foreign Policy.
Thanks. Well, clearly my presentation will be based on the Turkish example, because I think there are interesting points that have something to do with the distinctions that, specific points about the role of religion in modern societies that Harries also talked about. It's one of the most famous cases, I think, when it comes to the compatibility of Islam and modernism. We talk about France and then we talk about Turkey, which is a predominantly Muslim country. I feel like providing a little background, despite the fact that it's only 2 hours away from Tbilisi, Istanbul, which is where I'm from. To talk about the Turkish example, I think it is important to have a little bit of background about the role of Islam and how it evolved during the past couple of centuries, actually, and that includes the Ottoman Empire and then the Republic of Turkey. That came after that. Not sort of born out of its ashes like a phoenix, but more it was a very calculated model that was envisioned by Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, who was the general turned statesman who founded the Turkish Republic in 1923. So when we look at the Ottoman Empire, what we see, first of all, it is an empire that was founded in 1299 with the blessing of a Sufi sheikh in Anatolia. So that tells you that ever since the beginning, Islam was a crucial component of what this empire was going to be like and what role it would play in its region. And as we move on and come to the 16th century, Turkey assumes the Ottoman Empire back then as it was called, the Sultan assumes the role of the Caliphate as well, which means the Sultan is not only the political leader of the empire, but also the ultimate authority in the Sunni Muslim world. So